Hello, this is to continue my videos on Alistair Parker's introduction to the Second World War, this one dealing with the Allied advances after the D-Day landings in 1944. It's the second video in the set of three on Chapter 13, D-Day and Victory in Europe. As the Allied forces moved out of Normandy, the balance between the Americans and British forces shifted as the Americans increasingly became the predominant element in the Allied force, as they now had a much larger army, and the British had essentially reached their limit. Cordial relations continued between the two leaderships, despite the self-aggrandizing pronouncement of Montgomery. Parker, I should say, is quite scathing about both Montgomery and his official biographer. There were also logistical problems. Allied supplies still had to come in via either the port of Cherbourg in Normandy or Marseille in the far south, and then be transported mainly by road, as Allied air attacks had destroyed much of the French rail network. Allied lorries needed maintenance, and some divisions were immobilized because of a lack of transport. For this reason, Eisenhower vetoed plans by both Montgomery and the American General Patton for rapid advances because they couldn't have been properly supplied. On the 4th of September, a more northerly port, Antwerp in Belgium, was taken, its docks still intact, but much work was still required before it could be brought into operation, and when that happened, it greatly eased Allied supply problems from late November onwards. An Allied attempt to bypass German positions for a large-scale parachute assault, attempting to take the Dutch bridges on the Lower Rhine in early September, failed with heavy losses. This is Operation Market Garden, one of Montgomery's plans. See the movie A Bridge Too Far. The Allied advance, therefore, proceeded slowly and carefully. Meanwhile, in the east, the new Soviet campaign had begun on the 22nd of June. This was carefully planned, and the Soviets now possessed far more mobility than the Germans, who were also impeded by Hitler's refusal to allow retreats, and his insistence on an essentially static defense, holding on to certain key centers. The Soviets also now greatly outnumbered the Germans in men, aircraft, and tanks. The result was disastrous for the Germans. Three armies in the Army Group Center being fragmented, encircled, and largely destroyed in 2 weeks. The Soviets advanced far into Poland, up to the river Vistula and the suburbs of Warsaw. In the south, Soviet forces faced the Romanians, who largely abandoned the fight, even helping the Soviets in attacking their former German allies. Romania formally surrendered on the 23rd of August, and on the 31st of August, the Soviets entered Bucharest. By early September, they also had de facto control of Bulgaria, putting the entire German presence in the Balkans at risk. Reluctantly, in early October, Hitler ordered a complete withdrawal from Greece. But there was continued German resistance. From June to September 1944, the Germans had lost 1,235,000 men, 32% in the West, 68% against the Soviets. A fifth of these men lost confirmed dead, and the rest missing. Fleets of American and British bombers now roamed freely across German skies. Why then did the Germans fight on until May 1945? The Allies had called for unconditional surrender by the Germans, but Hitler and the most committed Nazis preferred death to surrender, which they expected would mean their own trial and execution. Even in September 1944, Hitler still thought that he might prevail, expecting the alliance against him to break up, so that he could then sell a beneficial peace for Germany to one or the other of the Allies. He understood that the interests of the Soviet Union and the two Western Allies were opposed, and also hoped that the British and Americans could be separated. However, his grasp of foreign opinion was poor, and he underestimated the extent to which the Allies were united in their pursuit of German defeat. Hitler thought that the longer the war continued, the more likely the alliance against him would collapse. To this end, he encouraged the development of new weapons and campaigns, particularly directed against Britain. So we have his revenge weapons, a new U-boat campaign, jet aircraft, and the Ardennes offensive. The first of his revenge weapons was the V-1, a pilotless aircraft with a 1-ton explosive warhead, which the British named a flying bomb. It was essentially a precursor of the modern cruise missile. With a range of about 200 miles, it flew at 400 miles per hour. It was first launched in June 1944, and attacks continued until March 1945. As British defence became increasingly effective with anti-aircraft guns employing new radar and proximity views conceived in Britain but developed in the United States, which exploded its shell without hitting the target, 3/4 of the missiles were by then destroyed before they hit the ground. This is a photograph of the V-1 flying bomb, with men pulling it along to give you an idea of its size. The second revenge weapon was the V-2, a rocket-propelled missile which flew at a speed of 3,600 miles per hour before hitting the ground from a great height. There was at that time no defense against it, but German supplies of the new weapon were limited. Together, the two weapons killed around 9,000 people in Britain and another 5,400 in northern France and Belgium. As they were highly inaccurate, they hit large urban areas like London and Antwerp indiscriminately. Those who were killed were civilians. This is a replica of the V-2 rocket. The second development of this period was the projected new U-boat campaign. Admiral Donitz persuaded Hitler to develop two new types of submarines which had snorkels, which meant they no longer had to surface for air. They also had streamlined hulls and more powerful electric batteries, so could move faster underwater and for longer periods, as well as radar equipment, so that they could no longer be easily detected. However, lack of skilled labor and raw materials and Allied bombing disrupted transport and assembly of parts, so far fewer were produced than planned. The third project was jet aircraft. Although the British were also working on the development of jet fighters, the German program was more advanced. However, there were too few of the new German jets, and they came too late to make a difference. The first squadron of British Meteor jets was only formed at the end of April 1945. This is a photograph of a captured Messerschmitt 262, forerunner of modern fighter jets. Finally, we have the Ardennes offensive, also called the Battle of the Bulge, which lasted for almost a month and a half from mid-December through to towards the end of January 45. Hitler had hoped that a big land offensive across the Ardennes, heavily forested hill country in the east of Belgium, would catch the Allies by surprise and enable the Germans to seize the port of Antwerp, and like the original Western thrust at the beginning of the war, split the Allied armies north and south of the thrust. Although a large German force was assembled and the Allies were caught off guard, the offensive failed, never even reaching the Meuse River. It had begun well. On the 16th of December 1944, 30 German divisions attacked across a 50-mile front against 5 American divisions. But the Americans were able to move quickly to block further advance. They were completely motorized, whilst the supporting German trucks supporting the panzer thrust often broke down. Some of the German infantry units even relied on horse-drawn transport, whilst German fuel supplies for the armoured units were insufficient. The Allies also enjoyed air superiority and were quickly able to devastate the German forces. So that's the end of this section. Many thanks to you for listening, and particular thanks to my patrons for their kind support and encouragement. Without them, I wouldn't be able to make these videos. You're very welcome to support my channel if you wish. Please do like, comment and share on the videos. Subscribe if you want to be notified of future videos. I'll give Patreon and PayPal links below if you want to provide practical support. Next week, towards the end of the war with Germany. Have a good day.